I know that a lot of people have heard about battery rejuvenation, and we've been talking about it for a number of years. And I did give a talk a couple of years ago on how batteries work and things like that, and there was a little bit of information on the battery rejuvenation process. But people wanted more information. A lot of people were buying our chargers and thinking that they rejuvenated batteries all by themselves. And so I ended up having long, involved conversations with people on the phone, way more often than I wanted to. And that led to the idea that, gee, maybe one, that there's enough people interested in this topic, and two, that I could actually put together a presentation that would cover most of the information about the process. So what I'd like to do is start the lecture. Incredible. This is a diagram that I've shown in a number of other presentations, but it's just, again, to review what we know about a lead-acid battery and how it works. This shows a single cell where the positive terminal of the battery, the positive plate, is made from lead oxide. Sometimes it's called lead peroxide. Sometimes it's called lead dioxide. Anyway, it's made out of lead and oxygen. And the negative plate is made out of pure lead that has a kind of a porous characteristic to it, and they call it sponge lead. And the electrolyte is made from a combination of water and sulfuric acid, which is H2SO4. And that this is what constitutes a system in a little jar that holds all this together in relationship to each other, is what's called a battery, or a cell, an electrical cell. And the reactions that happen are shown here, where when you allow electricity to flow, well, from the negative to the positive in the American system, and the positive to negative in the French system, or whatever else. What happens at the positive plate is that the lead oxide combines with the sulfuric acid to produce lead sulfate and a molecule of water and an extra oxygen. And what happens at the negative plate is that the lead combines with the sulfuric acid to produce another molecule of lead sulfate and a molecule of hydrogen. And when you combine these two equations, you get this, where lead oxide plus lead plus 2 molecules of sulfuric acid equals 2 molecules of lead sulfate and 2 molecules of water. So what we see is that the battery has a voltage potential between these two plates because of their chemical difference. Okay, this is lead oxide, this is lead. The potential difference between those two is approximately 2 volts. And that electrical potential is equivalent to the chemical difference. Okay? That's what sets that up. And what we see is, as we discharge this, the electrolyte has a certain number of dissolved ions in it which make the water very electrically conductive. Okay? And that's what the sulfate and the hydrogen ions are doing in the water. So there's a very, very low impedance electrical path here between two dissimilar materials, which sets up the voltage potential. Now, as we start discharging this, what happens is that a layer of lead sulfate builds up on the positive plate, and a layer of lead sulfate builds up on the negative plate. And we're taking these sulfate ions out of the solution. We're actually taking these guys out and adding them to the lead. And we're taking this and we're taking these hydrogens and the oxygen from here, and we're making water molecules. So what's happening is that the two plates are becoming more and more alike chemically, and we're pulling the ions out of the solution. We're literally watering down the electrolyte, and that is the reason why the battery goes through the changes it goes through, which is that the voltage starts dropping. The voltage is dropping because the chemical difference between the plates is disappearing. They're becoming more and more the same. That means that the difference between them is dropping. That's the voltage drop. The ability of the electrolyte to pass current is also being diminished because we're literally taking all the electrically charged ions out of it, and we're watering it down so it's more and more and more water. And that's why, as it discharges, it can't deliver as much current. Okay? It's pretty simple. Okay. So, and even though I'm going to be talking mostly about lead-acid batteries today, I did want to show you the chemistry of the nickel-cadmium battery, because this is also another battery that is very good to rejuvenate. And this one's a little bit different. This one is essentially an alkaline battery, whereas the other one was an acid battery. And so what we see is that the negative plate is cadmium, and the positive plate is a very interesting compound called nickel oxyhydroxide. Nickel oxygen hydroxide, okay? And the electrolyte is water and potassium hydroxide. So the interesting thing about this situation is that the potassium hydroxide does not enter into these reactions at all. This is the reaction of the discharging of the nickel-cadmium battery. The cadmium and the nickel oxyhydroxide plus water equals the nickel hydroxide and the cadmium hydroxide. Okay? And this is why the nickel-cadmium battery doesn't really change voltage very much. This is very interesting because the ions in solution really aren't going anywhere. What's happening is that we're actually pulling water out of here so that this solution is not getting watered down. It's actually becoming stronger. And that's the kind of the reverse reaction of what's going on in the lead battery. The lead battery, the electrolyte is getting watered down. Here, the water is actually being absorbed into the plates. And so just knowing this, when you are rejuvenating nickel-cadmium batteries, don't expect their voltage to change a lot. And so there's a whole different set of protocols for rejuvenating nickel-cadmium batteries than lead batteries, because their behavior is going to be very different, and that is 100% dependent on the chemistry, as you can see. Okay. And of course, as I have said before in some of my other lectures, both of these batteries are very, very, very similar to a standard alkaline fuel cell, where they just bring hydrogen gas in. This is the kind of thing that powers the space station and a lot of the things in orbit. Basically, they've got bottled oxygen, they've got bottled oxygen here and hydrogen here, and they react that with some sort of electrolyte that has a supply of hydroxide ions. They usually leave that indeterminate, again, because they don't really enter into the reaction, so it doesn't really much matter which one they use. And it generates water and electricity. Okay? So that's the function of a fuel cell. And what we see is that the batteries that we just talked about are essentially doing the same thing. Okay? So I eventually succumbed to the evidence and realized that all batteries are essentially chemically reversible water fuel cells. And that was a huge breakthrough. When John and I figured that out, we just said, well, why can't these things last forever? So in the acid chemistry, a battery produces electricity when a molecule of water is produced, and the positive plate is chemically reduced. That's what it does. In an alkaline chemistry battery, the battery produces electricity when a molecule of water is broken into hydrogen and oxygen and combined with the positive and negative plates. In either case, the amount of water in the battery is what is changing, and the production of electricity is the result. It's all about water. All the rest of the chemistry is just interesting, but it's not what's really going on. It is the water that is what's important. Okay? So this is what we finally figured out. As long as they are treated properly, batteries are 100% chemically reversible and may be recycled or cycled an indefinite number of times. Now, of course, the rude skeptics, jump on that word, indefinite. And so what indefinite means is a realistic number of times. In other words, we're not talking millions of times or something like that, although it may be possible. There's people out there driving cars that have gone 1 million miles and things like that, but you don't want to know how much they've spent making it work. But the idea here is that the water in the battery is being created and destroyed or broken down and rearranged, and all the other chemicals in the battery are essentially catalytic. They're not being used up, they're not going anywhere, and as long as, like I said, the battery is treated properly, there's no reason to believe that this can't go back and forth just a whole lot of times. Now, many battery manufacturers are very optimistic and say, well, you can charge and discharge this battery 5,000 times. And they love to sell that kind of battery into the solar industry. And then, after 600 cycles, the thing is so dead, it's not even worth calling a boat anchor. And but there's a reason for that, okay? And what we tell people is that even the ones that the battery manufacturers are saying will cycle 5,000 times, I'm saying there's no reason why it can't be cycled 15,000 times. Okay? And if that means you're charging it and discharging it once a day, 15,000 cycles is 45 years. Okay? So if you want to learn how to treat batteries properly so that you can will them to your grandchildren, if that becomes a major part of your estate, I'm very sorry. But at least you'll know how, okay? So the physical construction of the battery, again, there's something very interesting going on. If you're into electronics and you're into capacitors and diodes and other things like this, you'll notice that there are two terms here that are used with batteries that are also used in electronics, and those two words are cathode and anode. And what you'll see is that, I don't know if it's simply to confuse people or just to be backwards or something, but they're calling the positive plates the cathode. Of course, in electronics, it's the opposite, of course. And the anode is the negative. So I never have fully understood why they do that, but that's what they do. So don't be confused by it. Just either overlook it or whatever else. And but here, you can see that they actually give the density of the sulfuric acid as a 6 molar solution. And that's, of course, in general, it depends on the battery, the exact battery chemistry. If the lead has a little bit of calcium in it or some other things, then sometimes these the amount of acid in the solution is a little higher or a little lower. Okay. So again, what happens during discharge? We went over this. The lead oxide combines with the sulfuric acid to create lead sulfate plus water plus an oxygen. The negative plate lead combines with the sulfuric acid to produce lead sulfate and hydrogen. And then when you put these two together, you end up with 2 molecules of lead sulfate and 2 molecules of water. So again, this is the reaction during discharge. So it shows the lead and the oxygen. The oxygen combines with the hydrogen. The lead combines with the sulfate. This sulfate combines with that lead over there, and so on. And so what you end up with is lead sulfate showing up here, lead sulfate showing up here, and more water showing up in the electrolyte again. Okay, you can find these types of diagrams on the internet and all over the place. Okay, they all say the same thing. They all say that it's just about the production of water and the plating of both plates with sulfuric acid. I mean with lead sulfate. Okay. So this is what happens to the voltage when those chemical reactions are happening. So if we start with the battery basically at its what we'll call its standing voltage under full charge, we'll put a load on it, and what will happen is that the voltage will drop to some level. Obviously, if it drops to 12 volts, this is a fairly significant load. But then this is what we would call the working plateau of the voltage. Okay, in other words, for many hours, it looks like the voltage really isn't going anywhere, and it's just delivering current. But all the while, what's happening is that layer of lead sulfate is building up on the plates, and the electrolyte is getting watered down, so that at a certain point, there just isn't enough material left. There aren't enough sulfate ions in solution to be reacting with the plates at that rate anymore. And so what you see is the voltage starts to drop, and finally it really falls off. Okay? I'm sure anybody who's ever run a battery has kind of noticed these things. So it's not, this is not a big surprise. So then at the final end of this process, if we take the load off here, then what happens is that the voltage will rise back up to what we'll call the discharge resting voltage. Okay? And if you ever walk up to a battery that hasn't been under discharge for a while, and it is reading 12 volts, I can guarantee you that is 95% discharged. 95% discharged. A 12-volt battery standing at 12 volts is dead. Don't expect a lot more out of it. Okay? So that graph pretty much shows all that. Okay, so what happens now when we recharge the battery is that we have to undo what we just did. Okay, we have to reverse these processes. Now, when you discharge the battery, there's nothing that can go wrong. Okay, in other words, those electrochemical pathways which I have just described are pretty much the only thing that can happen. But when you charge, that's not quite true. And let me explain. To charge the battery, what we need to do is we need to take the excess water molecules and we have to break them back into hydrogen and oxygen, which is called electrolysis. Okay? And if those gases just boil out of the battery, guess what? We didn't charge the battery. So we have to put the electricity into the battery just so we can break the water molecule and get the oxygen to recombine with the lead before it floats away, to get the hydrogen to combine with the sulfate before it floats away as a gas. That is the chemical pathway that recharges the battery. If this is interrupted, if this happens only halfway, then we have wasted electricity. We have poured electricity into the battery and it has not caused the chemical changes we need to happen that is equivalent to charging the battery. So, this is the problem, okay? The problem is that this process is not well managed by battery chargers that you can buy on the market. They just throw electricity at the battery and kind of hope all that happens. And it either does or doesn't. Okay? So if you've ever just bought a battery charger at Harbor Freight, good prices, wow. And noticed that at the end of the charge, the battery's hot and lots of gases boiling out of the cells. And you say, oh, this is great. My battery's charged. Yeah, right. No. Every single kilowatt you take out of the wall, that either, if it heats the battery, what you're doing is you're running the battery like a resistor. Right. That's what creates heat. That doesn't create chemical changes. If the gases are coming out, then they're not recreating the H2SO4, so that's not charging the battery. So if the battery warms up during charge, if the battery off-gases during charge, that's not charge. That's what you normally get. So those are the things that our rejuvenation process and understanding this is about, okay? What we're going to be looking at is the charging process. How do we create the conditions whereby the optimized chemical reactions are happening in the battery, and that we can bring these reactions back to a condition which is conducive to a full life battery. Okay, so here is the graph which shows the voltage of a standard 12-volt battery under charge. Okay, so let's say it's down here somewhere and we put the charger on and it will rise, the voltage will rise to what we call, again, the charging plateau. Okay, and it will stay and it will just rise ever so slightly for a long period of time until it gets to point O. And at that point, the trajectory of the charge really starts changing and the voltage starts rising much more rapidly. And finally, it will reach point P, which is, if you're looking at this, if you're graphing the charge on a computer, or if you're watching this carefully on a digital meter, you will see that at some point the voltage will reach a peak and then drop back slightly. And at that point, if we didn't turn the charger off, which is what this shows, no matter how much more energy we put on it, the voltage would remain the same and it would be slightly below that peak. That point P is the indicator. It is the electric-chemical indicator that the chemical changes in the battery have finished. There are no more sulfate ions on the plates. There's nothing left to do. And after that, all electricity put into the battery will cause off-gassing. Okay. Because electrolysis is all that's left. Okay? There's nothing else to react to. So, even though we would love to believe that all of this is a very, very neat, orderly process on the plates, that the sulfate lays itself down in wonderful sheets of shining sulfate, and everything is smooth and lovely, it's not. Okay, and in fact it's very chaotic and it's all completely dependent on micro voltage differences and the currents wanting to go to the absolute lowest resistance point they can find. Water seeking its own level through a bed of pebbles. Okay? And so this, it took me a long time to find a drawing like this on the internet, but it basically shows how very unusual all the different possible features are in these layers. And it's absolutely true. This is what it looks like. Okay? And so you get these little nodules and these little things. Okay? And this is showing, this is showing it in a way that it's showing one or two here or there. But this is happening at the molecular level, okay? Literally at the layer of atoms, hydrogen atoms, oxygen atoms, and so on. So this is happening at the microscopic level, and when it shows like one of these little things here, what's really happening is millions of these things are going on the plates, okay? So, the question is, what happens if the charge process is incomplete or is forced to proceed too quickly? Okay, these are two of the issues that we address with battery rejuvenation. The industry has wanted everybody to hurry up, work 3 shifts, for the price of 1. And especially in big, large batteries when running forklifts and things like this, they just put these things on blast chargers and do everything they can to get through the shift. And what they're doing is they're eating the battery alive on the inside chemically. And so what happens is that more and more of these little defects start building into the plates. And the chemical combinations of the hydrogen ions and the sulfate ions and the oxygen replating to the lead oxide and so on, these processes take their own sweet time. And you can't make them happen faster than they happen. Okay? So when you want it, I want it to happen faster. So we crank up the voltage and we force more current at it. And what this does is that it makes the materials break off in larger packets than just one atom at a time. It creates large aggregates of compounds to try and move quickly to carry all that charge. And this is what builds up these bigger pockets. Okay, that's what happens when we try and charge it too fast. Okay, and what can happen in there in those pockets is that there are deposits of the sulfate materials, but then they get coated over with lead or lead oxide, and so that little piece of sulfate then gets incorporated and buried in the plate. So what happens, we can create heat, gases, and pockets of unresolved sulfate are left in the plates. Okay? And there's one other little problem with this. That for the lead acid battery, there are two forms of lead sulfate. There's two different crystalline forms. And this is one of the big problems, okay? During discharge, the lead sulfate that forms on the plates is a soft, porous material that is easily penetrated by the electrolyte so that the discharge process may proceed unrestricted. The lead sulfate's building up on the outside of the plate, but that doesn't restrict the currents from moving through them and attacking new, good material underneath to keep the process going as far as discharge goes. Okay? Any of this material that is not resolved during the next charge cycle remains in the plate. Again, this is not rocket science. Eventually, it begins to undergo a physical change whereby it converts to a hard crystalline form that is no longer porous and no longer allows the electrolyte or currents to penetrate it. Okay? So as long as it remains as this soft, porous material, not too much problem. But this process, if it is left kind of sidelined out of the electrochemical pathway, the sulfate starts becoming this other stuff. It's still lead sulfate, but it changes its physical appearance. And sometimes you can look down into an old battery and you'll see these white crystals on the plates. That's that stuff. Okay? It didn't just grow there like a mushroom. It's not bad, but it is lead sulfate in a form that is really not very involved in how the battery's working anymore. Okay, so what are the necessary conditions for a complete charge? A battery that has no physical damage, which means no cracked case, no cracked terminal posts, and no shorted cells. We would like to start with a battery that does not have these conditions. Okay? 2, a battery charger that can provide an unrestricted upper voltage so the charging process can continue until all of the possible electrochemical changes are exhausted. We need a charger that will allow that voltage to rise to that point P that we looked at on the other graph. And for a 12-volt lead-acid battery, that is somewhere between 15.2 and 15.5. And so if you have a commercial battery charger that will not put out a voltage above about 14.6 or something like that, 14.7, 14.8, you can never, I repeat, you can never finish the charge. You can boil the battery for 1,000,000 years at 14.8, and it will not finish. Point P will not show up. You need a battery charger that can provide an unrestricted upper voltage. So the battery itself must tell the system when it is done. Okay. And a set of conditions in the battery plates where all of the sulfate ions are in their soft form, so they can be redissolved back into the electrolyte during the charging process. Okay? You need all three of these conditions if you hope to have a complete charge. Okay. So what are the primary conditions found in a battery that don't work anymore? Boy, I was up late. Too much editing, really. I cut and pasted this a couple times, I guess. Okay. One, the accumulated effects of chronic undercharging. This is one of the primary conditions found in a battery that don't work no more. Okay, the chronic effects of long periods of disuse. And physical damage. That's pretty much it. I mean, you can hit it with a hammer, doesn't like that, everything leaks out, or it's been undercharged all its life, and it resents that chemically. Or the accumulated effects of long periods of disuse. Okay. So what happens to a battery after multiple incomplete discharges or charges? Okay. Any charge cycle that does not resolve 100% of the sulfate material formed on the plates during the last discharge leaves pockets of material in the plates. We went over this before. Right. Any of these pockets of sulfate material left long enough in the plates will convert to the hard crystalline form. And hundreds of events like this eventually leave millions of pockets of crystalline sulfate in the plates that effectively block the flow of current. Those are the conditions. That's what happens to a battery that is charged with a commercial charger. What happens to a battery after it sits on a shelf unused for a year or two? This is the other situation that we can run into. Okay, the chemical reaction in the battery that produces lead sulfate deposits on the plates happens slowly, even if the battery is not being used. This is one of the few weaknesses of the lead-acid battery. If you charge it up completely and stick it on a shelf, you come back a year later, it's not happy. There's something odd about it. It looks like it may even measure as like 12.6 on a voltmeter, and you put a load on it and it goes flat. Won't give you any current at all. Okay? Okay. Left for a long time, it produces a thick layer of the hard crystalline sulfate on the outside of the plates. That's what happens. It starts out as the soft material, but left over time, it converts to the the hard crystalline form. Okay? And so this is why it may still seem like there's a voltage there, but it's very, very superficial. Thing will absolutely not give you current. And if you take it to, Pet Boys or somebody, that sells batteries, they're going to put it on their super duper machine, and it's going to say, buy a new battery. This thing is dead as a doornail. Okay? And a lot of people, that's what they do. However, this battery in particular is the bread and butter of the battery rejuvenating business. Okay. So what is battery rejuvenation? Battery rejuvenation is the process of restoring a battery in any condition into a battery whose chemical state is: the negative plate is 100% sponge lead, the positive plate is 100% lead peroxide, the electrolyte is the proper concentration of sulfuric acid in pure water. And creating these changes in the battery without adding anything except electricity and water. That is what we call battery rejuvenation. In other words, we're going to take a battery in whatever condition it presents itself to us, and we're going to put it back in the chemical set of conditions that it came straight out of the factory. And we're going to do that entirely without changing the chemistry at all. We're not going to add any other secret chemistry, pink stuff or any, nothing. No other compounds. We don't want to change the chemistry. It's already fantastic, totally predictable, completely understandable. We don't want to change the electrochemical pathways at all. Okay? So, can all non-operating batteries be rejuvenated? No. Well done. Even if I try really hard? Okay. How do I determine if a battery is a good candidate for rejuvenation? This is the most important question you can ask yourself. Not, oh, let's go to the dump and work on these. No. Okay? We want to find out which batteries have which kind of damage. We want to understand what's happened to it so that we can make a logical decision about whether or not it's worth our time and effort to try and make this back into a functioning battery. Okay, so the first thing is to learn the history of its prior use if you possibly can. For instance, if you want to rejuvenate golf cart batteries, the simplest place to get golf cart batteries is at a golf course that has, electric golf carts, okay? And one of the things we're going to know about those batteries is, one, they've been chronically undercharged. We know this. That's going to be their primary problem. But the good news is that almost all modern golf carts have electronic motor controllers which never let the battery drop below 10.5. This is really important to know, and that's a very good thing. In other words, this battery has never had somebody, put it in their car and then leave their lights on all night and drop the sucker to 2 volts. Okay? Those batteries have not had that, that trauma. Okay? So, learn the history of its prior use. This is a very important piece of information. So, we want to know, has the battery ever been deeply discharged? If it has, we want to know, because that's going to change the protocol we put it through. That's going to affect the protocol we put it through. Has the battery been left unused for long periods? That's the piece of information that we really want to find out, because if it has, the probability is that the person who currently owns it is going to believe that it's really a boat anchor. And you're just going to be sitting there smiling quietly with big dollar signs in your eyes and say, well, gosh, I can take it off your hands if you don't want it anymore. Because that's the battery that we can make fast money with. Okay? Because all the sulfate is sitting on the surface of the plates in, finally, nice, neat, clean layers. Ooh. And it's not very deep. It's all very superficial. So once we crack into that and start resolving that, it all resolves back really quickly. All the material underneath it is clean plate material, and that battery pops back like a dream. But it looks the worst to the owner. Okay? So we're going to do a physical inspection. Of course, is there any shiny wet residue on the top? Well, you ever seen a battery without shiny wet residue? By the way, that shiny wet residue, it's not because the battery's sweating, okay? What's happening is that the battery is being boiled at the top of its charge. They've been equalizing it, which means boil the hell out of it, and hope, that it straightens things out. And what that shiny wet residue is sulfuric acid. You can prove that to yourself by getting out your voltmeter and sticking your negative on the negative plate, and then taking the positive probe of your voltmeter and just sticking it down in this wet, slimy residue, and take a look at the voltage divider you just produced between the terminals, and it'll tell you that, oh, there's a big open resistor right across the top of the battery, which is slowly discharging the battery. The battery now has an open discharge path on its top. Okay? That's what that shiny wet stuff is. So chances are, if you see a battery that has a lot of that stuff, you're not going to find a battery. You're going to find a battery that may be discharging and may have been discharged deeply. But luckily, that's a pretty slow discharge. But if you've heard the old the old stories, if you put a battery down on cement and leave it there, it'll discharge. This is why. It doesn't discharge because it's sitting on the cement. It discharges because of this. Because batteries that are put on the cement already have this. Okay? This is what discharges the battery. I can guarantee you the charge is not draining out through ergonomic leakage through the plastic case. That is definitely not what is happening. Okay, is the case bulging or cracked? That is an indicator that the plates inside are warped. They're pushing on the case. And that happens when a battery is radically overheated. That's heat damage, okay? And that can lead to other problems. So unless you don't have a lot of batteries to work with, I would pass on any batteries that show that those types of characteristics, at least in a severe case. You may find one that's just got a little bit, and that would work fine. Okay, are there any broken terminals? You can actually look inside the cells and see if there's any cracked plates. Look in there with a flashlight, or use your X-ray vision, whichever is easier. And so we want to take a look at what the physical condition is. And then we are going to do some initial tests. Okay? What is the voltage reading of the battery? Now this is a piece of information that you're going to add to other information. In other words, just because the voltage says it's 0, or just because it says it's 2 volts, or 4 volts, or 6 volts, or 8 volts, or 10 volts, or 12 volts, doesn't necessarily mean anything all by itself. A battery that has been sitting around that has deep, thick layers of sulfation may read 12.6. won't push a gnat up the wall, but it may have a superficial voltage enough to run a capacitive voltmeter. Okay, so all by itself, this voltage reading isn't significant, but you want to add that to what else you know about the battery. Will the battery take current from a standard charger? This is another important thing to know. Just strap, one of your favorite Harbor Freight chargers on it. The the abuser, we call it, and see if it'll take some current. And if it will, then what we want to do is charge it for a couple of minutes, and then take a thermal test of the cells. And what that is we take an infrared thermometer and aim it at each of the cells while it's under charge with a hot charger. And what we're looking for is the temperature difference in the cells. Okay. Now, typically in a battery, the terminal cells, the cell right next to the negative terminal and the cell right next to the positive terminal, are the least likely cells to have damage. Okay. Almost invariably, the inner cells will be the ones that have the problems, the impedance problems. Okay? So what you're looking for is you want to get an idea of what the terminal cell temperatures are, and then compare that with the inner cells. Now, in a 6-volt battery, there's only one inner cell. In a 12-volt battery, there are 4 inner cells. Okay? And that's going to tell you something too. If one of those cells has a temperature that's 5 or 10 degrees hotter than the other cells, then I don't care what else is going on. I'm going to put that one aside, okay? Because that one is telling me that one of the cells is not behaving as well as the other cells. And I'm going to have to figure out how to work on that inner cell from the outer cells, okay? This is what boiling the battery, equalizing, and all that stuff. That's what they're trying to deal with, okay? But for rejuvenation, we are looking for the cream. We're looking for easy pickings, the low-hanging fruit, the all sorts of wonderful ideas where we can make money and do less work. Okay, we want to work smart, not hard, right? Okay, so what is battery rejuvenation? Battery rejuvenation is both an art and a science. Okay? It is not a magic wand. It is not something that only John and Peter know how to do. Okay? The science relates to understanding how to rebuild the chemistry of the battery using water and electricity, which is what we've been talking about. And the art relates to understanding what the battery is telling you about its internal condition, so you can apply the science appropriately. Because no two children are alike, no two batteries are alike. Okay? Same thing. Okay. So battery rejuvenation consists of only 4 activities, unless sleeping is added to that. We're going to test the battery, we're going to charge the battery, we're going to discharge the battery, and we're going to add water to the battery. Those are the only 4 things that we're going to do. Okay? And the tests that we're going to do on the battery, we're going to look at voltage, we're going to look at current production possibilities, we're going to look at thermal responses in the cells, and we're going to run load tests. Pretty much those are the only kinds of tests we need to do. We do not have to open the battery. Once we've decided we're going to work on it, you never have to open the battery, you never have to test the strength of the acid, get your pants dirty, any of those other things, okay? We do everything from the outside, okay? the thermal test is more reliable about telling you what's going on in that cell than the hydrometer test telling you the condition of the acid. Way more, because it's direct. It's telling you, I have an impedance problem. Current is causing a voltage drop here, which is making this cell function as a resistor. That's why it's heating up. There's a big voltage drop there instead of a voltage gain there. Okay? That's the deal. Okay? So we do not have to open the battery. Okay. Charging, we're going to charge until the voltage will not rise anymore. Okay? Now, our chargers are designed to have two lights, a red light and a green light. And of course, the red light means stop and the green light means go. No. The red light means it's charging and the green light means it has reached the top of its charge. Okay? Now, people say, well, I put it on and the red light never went off. Okay? And I said, well, did you put a voltmeter on it? Did you watch what was happening? Because we're not expecting, if you have a brand new battery, the charger should be able to top that battery, bring it into the green, and in the green what happens is it scales back how much current it's delivering and just holds it in a float mode that won't cause excess electrolysis. Okay? That's what green light means in our chargers. Okay? So when we're rejuvenating a battery from an unknown condition, we're not expecting that the battery is going to go to the green light on the first charge. It may not get there for the first 10 charges. Okay? We're going to put a voltmeter on this thing and we're going to charge the battery until the voltage will rise no more. Point P. Okay? And what that means is that I have resolved all the sulfation I can find. The rest is in the plates. Okay? So, you charge the battery until the voltage will not rise anymore. Not till the green light comes on. Okay? This is the battery telling you something. The battery is telling you, I can't get there. I can't get there now. Okay? Then we're going to discharge, and we're going to do a progressive, deeper discharge until all the chemical issues are resolved. And I'll show you what this means in just a second. And then we're going to add water to the cells only when it is safe. Now, what do I mean by that? When you charge the battery, quite often, when you start, the battery cells, if you open them and look in there, the battery cells may look dry. And as you charge it, water will appear in the cell. Water will come out of the material. Okay? So if you take a battery that needs to be charged like that, and you start by saying, well, this is a bad dry battery, I'm going to better add some water. No. Not then. Don't do it. Because what happens is that you've just put in too much water, and now as it charges, the water will come out of the plates and that cell will overflow, and it will take some of its acid and put it on the floor. Now you have taken some of the acid out of that cell. You've screwed everything up. You have ruined the balance that has, as long as all the acid is still there, we're good. Water is, cheap, okay? But getting each of these cells to run in a balanced way requires that they each have the same chemical conditions. And if we add water to a cell before a charge and the cell overflows, then we have we've made a mess of our attempt to rejuvenate that battery. Okay? So we only add water at the top of the charge. If the battery cell still looks low after you've brought it to the top of the charge, then I would say at that point, add water just to the top of the plates. Just not up to the the bottom of that little section of plastic in the case, okay? Not up to the bottom of that. Just cover the plates. Okay? Because I can guarantee you more water will be coming out of these cells. Okay? Okay. So what is the rejuvenation method? After initial tests, begin by either charging or discharging, determining by the initial voltage. In other words, if the voltage is 0, we can pretty much guess we're not going to discharge first. Okay, with an external voltmeter attached to the battery, charge the battery until the voltage stops rising. That's the first step, as I was telling you before. Okay? Then we're going to discharge to about 11 volts. Okay? And typically, what we want to do is we want to stay within what is generally referred to as the C10 or C20 rate, okay? Which basically means how much current you can take out of it to fully discharge it in either 10 hours or 20 hours, okay? Typically, like a golf cart battery is a 6-volt battery that's rated at 225 amp hours. Okay, that 225 amp hours is what's called the C20 rate of discharge. Okay, all of those ratings are at what's called C20, which means if I discharge it at exactly 11 amps for 20 hours, I can get the 225 amp hours. Okay, but if I discharge it faster than that, I will probably get less. So the C10 rate for a golf cart battery may only be 200 amp hours. Okay? And typically a golf cart is discharged by its motor at about the C5 rate, about 50 amps continuous discharge rate for a golf cart. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to discharge until the battery drops to 11 volts under load, okay? And then we're going to take it off the load, and then we're going to charge it to, again, the voltage, in other words, the top. We're going to take it to a topping event. And again, we need a voltmeter to look at this, and if you're charting this on a computer graph, then this is very easy to see where these events happen. So we're going to discharge it to 11 volts and then bring it to a topping event. Then we're going to discharge it to 10.5 volts and take it to a topping event. And then we're going to take it down to 10 volts and then take it to a topping event. And the reason we're doing this is very simple. What we're doing is we want to very carefully and slowly and carefully dig out all these pockets of the crystalline sulfate. We don't want to rapidly discharge this battery so that these things just fall to the bottom of the case when they're exposed, because everything's happening so fast. What we want to do is we want to expose these again to the electrolyte so that they can resoften and redissolve. And they will. But it takes a little time. And therefore, we don't want to dig too deep into the battery too fast. Okay? We want to make sure that all of this happens and we resolve all of these little pockets of the hard crystalline sulfate. Okay? And at some point, what's going to happen is that all of a sudden this topping event is going to start going up, and you're going to start seeing it. And finally the battery will continue to rise to 14.8, 15, 15.2, 15.3, 15.4, 15.5. Okay, and that's when you know that your next discharge is going to take a long time because you're starting to get the capacity back. Okay. So this is the method, okay? Now, if the sulfate material didn't have these two forms, rejuvenation would be a breeze, okay? All we'd have to do is flatten the dang battery to 2 volts and charge her back and we're done. Get her done, man. But That isn't what happens, okay? You can bring back some batteries that way, but they'll never come back 100%. You're going to end up dropping a lot of this material into the bottoms of the cells, and hopefully, if you don't drop too much in there, it won't short the cell out. But ultimately, that battery will still not have new life. Okay, it may be able to top high, and it may have, but it's never going to have the full capacity that the brand new battery had. Okay, because you've just left some of the material on the bottom. Okay, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reincorporate all the material back where it was when it came out of the factory. Okay, and that takes a little bit of, TLC. Okay, so this method was developed. This method, if the battery is going to rejuvenate, this will do it 100% of the time. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, brief question. Any of that lead sulfate in the bottom of the batteries, can that be included in this process, or is it completely?
Yeah, once it's on the bottom of the battery, it is outside of the electrochemical pathway, and it will never be a part of your battery again, other than as a nuisance. Yeah, we're not going to take questions like this. We'll ask you to come up, and because we want the questions on the tape as well. So let's just keep going here. Okay, other issues. Always be on the lookout for shorted cells. Okay, and this is indicated by a voltage being 2 or more volts below what is expected. So if you've got a battery and you're charging it up, and it goes to 10.5. And it just won't go anymore. That's a shorted cell. That's one cell out of the game, okay? Or 2 cells or whatever, multiples of that. And that can happen anytime. If you discharge, if your battery may be showing 12 volts when you start, and you do a couple of these cycles, and all of a sudden the thing drops. Oops. That means what happened was what we were trying to prevent from happening. That means a bunch of stuff fell down instead of you exposed it, and it didn't reconvert fast enough because you were impatient or something happen, and the material shorted the cell out. And it can happen in the middle of the process. So you always be on the lookout for shorted cells because they can show up anytime. And you can always verify the shorted cell with the thermal test. Okay, the minute one of the cells, the minute you start seeing a voltage that's at least 2 volts below what you're looking for, get out the thermal tester again, and you're going to see one of them's hotter. Okay, you see those 2 indicators, you're back in the boat anchor industry. Okay. Always charge the battery slowly. Okay. This is the absolute opposite of everything that you've ever been told. Everybody's in a hurry. Everybody wants it done yesterday. Your time is money, all this kind of stuff, okay? Here's the deal. The rate of current that you apply to the plates is directly proportional to an electroplating process, okay? And if you electroplate slowly, you can expect small particles and a very fine deposition rate. And small particles means lots of surface area. Wonderful. Those are the things we are looking for. That's what builds capacity in the battery. Surface area of the materials. So we want to charge slowly. We want to make sure that the battery chemistry has time to absorb the electricity we're putting in at its own rate, in a happy way. We want a good report card back to the principal, okay? And the principal is your pocketbook, okay? So we want to keep the battery charging slowly because we want the particle deposition size to be small, and we want the surface area of the plates to be as large as possible. All of these things are in direct relationship to each other. There's no way around that, okay? You can't rush the chemical reactions. They will simply happen at their own rate in relationship to the impedance of the battery, and the more you push it, the less results you'll get, okay? So Patience with the process will lead to good results. Impatience will lead to marginal results. And if you don't have time to do it right, don't. Okay. Battery rejuvenation business criteria. Okay. So that is how to rejuvenate a battery. That is all of the fundamentals. If you go back and study this for 10 years, you'll understand as much as I do. So, but there's really no substitute for just doing it, not worrying about. You're gonna lose some batteries, in your learning process. But this actually is pretty close to the full list of the criteria that we use. Okay. So now, what we want to talk is the possibility of doing this as a business. Okay? That's different than actually knowing how to do it. Okay? So the purpose of any business, just to be redundant, the purpose of any business is to be profitable. I mean, if you can run a battery rejuvenation charity if you'd like, but this is about business. So battery rejuvenation is a technology. Okay? Inherently, it's not a business. It's a technology. The battery rejuvenation business is an attempt by you to use the battery rejuvenation technology to make a monetary profit. If I'm going too slow for you, please just I'm trying to cover it, really, because these are the things that people kind of overlook. Okay? And one thing that we have basically seen is that battery rejuvenation does not work as a service. In other words, drop your battery off, we'll rejuvenate it for $5 and then give it back to you. This does not work. You won't make a profit. You won't be happy. They won't be happy. Very low happiness scale. Okay? Very little money. Okay? Doesn't even work really well as a hobby. The business model that works is where you take other people's dead batteries off their hands for free, and that way they're happy. You have gotten rid of this dead hulk that they are sick of kicking around and stubbing their toe on and all that other kind of stuff. And then you turn around and sell them one of your rejuvenated batteries. And you can say, well, I'm pretty sure that this thing is almost as good as new, and I'll sell it to you for 50% of what a new battery costs. How's that? And everybody's happy. Okay? You're making money. They're giving you the next battery you might be able to make money on, and they're taking a rejuvenated battery off you for a song. They're saving money. You're keeping your materials moving. And then that battery is in your personal possession. It's yours. If it takes a week, if it takes 2 days to rejuvenate it, if it takes a week to rejuvenate it, if it takes 10 days to rejuvenate it, you've got the time to work it out. Okay? You're not waiting. Well, I thought it would be done by now. You don't have to deal with any of that, okay? Okay. So, if you're going to start a business, you have to treat it like a business. And don't be afraid to develop a business plan, marketing analysis, startup costs, fixed costs, running costs, timeline to profitability, capital requirements, labor requirements, equipment and infrastructure requirements, training requirements. Ordinary stuff for business. If this is your business plan, yeah, not a lot of profit here, okay? Okay. Okay, so the business plan should include identifying the markets you're interested in. If you're not interested in the batteries you're working on, then it's just going to be another drudgery for you, okay? And you're going to figure, why am I doing this, okay? So there are a number of particularly lucrative markets. One of them is in the older nickel cadmium tool battery situations, old drills and that kind of thing. Those batteries, a lot of the chargers that John has, like the 1AU in particular, those types of batteries have been rejuvenated to absolute like new condition, and quite often for the old Makita and some of the more high-priced tools, which you would rather not replace with a Harbor Freight. Getting a new replacement battery for those can be really expensive, and that's why you go and buy the Harbor Freight thing, because you can get a whole new drill for less than it would take to buy the replacement battery for your really good stuff. And so this is one of the places where you can put together a relatively lucrative business if you can find a flow of those types of batteries. And the best flow of those types of batteries is getting to know a lot of building contractors, people who are using a lot of portable tools. They're charging the blazes out of them all the time, and they need them now. Okay, you can identify these markets and identify the battery sources for that kind of thing. Another one is picking up golf cart batteries. It's a pretty heavy battery. 6 volt, 225 amp hour, and we know pretty much what the conditions that they've been subjected to are. But we can turn those things around and sell them back into the solar industry. Everybody who's got a solar house needs more panels or more batteries or more something. Okay, and they're always looking to replace batteries and other things like this. And if you can sell them, a good battery for half price, boy, you can move them a lot. So there's an almost unlimited number of golf cart batteries that are available in an almost unlimited market to sell into the growing solar market. So those are two, but there are a lot of other ones. And but you need to identify which markets you're interested in. Okay, and again, identify where you're going to be getting your flow of batteries. You're going to need to get a whole bunch of them. And you're also going to want to get to know your battery recyclers, because not every battery, remember the big no, can every battery be rejuvenated? No. So you're going to end up with batteries that you find in your candidate test really fails the test. So you're going to want to be able to recycle them. You want to know your recycler. Okay. So the proper equipment for a business plan like this, you're going to need chargers, and you're going to need chargers that are capable of producing that topping charge, that unlimited voltage top, so that the battery can find its own natural top, because that's one of the characteristics of a complete charge. And our chargers will do that. And the main chargers that we recommend for this are the 1AU, the 2A12, the 10A12, and the 24A12. And we also sell a golf cart charger, and we do absolutely not recommend that as a bulk rejuvenator. Don't stick 6 batteries on this thing and expect to run it 24/7. We've got a lot of melted transformers back and things like that. So that's the golf cart charger is not a bulk rejuvenator. It's one of the few chargers we sell that doesn't even have the word rejuvenator associated with it. Okay, although it will make a golf cart's batteries, if you use it properly as a golf cart charger, which means you're charging them overnight once a day or something like that, and letting the batteries top and everything, your batteries will last 10 or 15 years, and you won't be replacing them in 3 years like almost all other golf carts are. Okay. So other test equipment, we want voltmeters and infrared thermometers. Okay, power supplies, load testers, battery capacity analyzers, all these types of things. Every kind of piece of equipment here are things that are in John's shop. Also, the dischargers. We sell a discharger that John's company makes. But if you want to do this in a for a real professional way. The West Mountain Radio computerized battery analyzer is by far has the most robust software package associated with it. It can graph both the charge and discharge of the batteries. It can lay multiple discharges in different colors on the same graph and everything, so you can really get some really good data on what's going on with the battery because of the robustness of the software package that comes with that machine. Plus, it's completely software controlled, so you can just type in, I want this thing to discharge at 10 amps on a constant current flow and so on. So, and it'll adjust for the dropping voltage and everything else. So, so business issues, obviously business licenses, OSHA regulations, toxic materials handling, that kind of thing. Be aware for yourself. Okay, I mean your toxic materials handling may just be some large trays that you put under your batteries. Okay, in other words, it doesn't have to be exotic. But if you're charging and discharging a lot of batteries, you may also want to have a ventilation, a vented work area here, just so you're not breathing all this stuff. It eventually catches up to you. Okay. So here's pictures of the chargers. The 1AU, of course, is the charger that we have that will charge anything from a 1.5 volt battery all the way up to a 24 volt battery, up to about 7 amp hours. So it's a 1 amp charger. The 1AU stands for 1 amp universal voltage. It's the only charger like it in the world. Really, really good for rejuvenating the NiCad 18 volt drill batteries and all these exotic different voltages, the 14.4s and that kind of stuff. That works on all that kind of stuff. You've got the 2A12 here. This is a 2 amp 12 volt charger, and it'll take a battery up to about 100 amp hours and push it to 15.8. It's a 2 amp charger, but it can really push. I use it on my cars. If you top the voltage in your automobile battery about once a month, just leave it on overnight, and your battery will last as long as your car. Not a problem. Just get rid of that unresolved sulfate once in a while. The 10, this is pretty much the workhorse, 10 amp. So that'll work on anything up to the golf cart size, the 225 amp hour batteries. That's about a C20 charge rate, 10 amps, which is perfect to build that surface area. Charge, give you that real slow, steady charge with a topping voltage. And then for the bigger batteries up to 500 to 1,000 amp hours, the 24A12. That's a much bigger workhorse. That's an expensive charger. All of these are ridiculously expensive. These are the most expensive battery chargers in the world. No one in their right mind would pay this much. And we're back ordered to the wall, and I can't even deliver them, okay? And I know there's a number of you very, very loving and patient customers here who've been waiting an absurdly inordinate amount of time for your chargers. And but that's what's going on, okay? They're handmade with love right here in Hayden, Idaho, where things go slow. Okay. The proper dischargers, as I said, we sell the Energetics load box, which will discharge at up to 50 amps in 3 amp increments. So it'll go 3 amps, 6 amps, 9 amps, 12 amps, in 3 amp increments all the way up to 48 against a 12 volt load. So if your battery's sitting at 13, it'll pull 50 amps when you push in all the loads. This is what the West Mountain radio unit looks like. This is the primary hub of the unit and the software package that comes with it. And then there are these devices that are called amplifiers, which allow you to add up to 500 watts at a time. In addition to this one comes with the brain, and this will discharge up to 150 watts at a time. And it comes with the software, and then you can add these amplifiers. So this is a 500 watt amplifier. So at that point, then you could, if you had just this one and this one, you could discharge batteries up to 650 watts. It's almost a horsepower. You could add a second one, and then you're up to almost 1,200 watt discharges. So you can pretty much handle just about anything with that equipment. Like I said, other meters that are used. This is a clamp on amp meter, and highly recommend that you get one of the ones that will measure both DC and AC amps. DC amps is the hardest one to find. Most of them will do AC. So if you're looking for a clamp-on amp meter, make sure that you see in the specifications that it will measure DC currents. Okay, this is a standard load tester. The only thing that's in here is a meter and a big spring heating element. Here you can test batteries and make your toast for breakfast at the same time. This is one of the thermal IR thermometers. Some of them come with a laser beam that you just point it at a surface, and it'll tell you what the temperature is at the point of the laser beam. You also can buy smaller units that are just more like a little little beeper clicker kind of thing. These are a lot cheaper. Typically, they don't have the same kind of temperature range as these do, but there's really good ones out there, like this brand here, in the $15 range. So this isn't a make or break type of thing. You've got the big capacity battery capacity analyzers here. These are by BK Precision, and as wonderful as these seem. This is actually a more true test. These, John and I took a look at the patents that these are all based on, and a guy found that if he threw a specific frequency at a battery, he could run that through a mathematical algorithm and determine its internal impedance. It's all very sweet, okay? But it's still just a calculation. It's not actually a measurement, okay? And that's the important thing here. We're trying to actually find out what's going on, and so every time we don't have to guess, this gives you a very intelligent, expensive guess at the capacity of the battery. And believe me, by the time you've spent the money for these, you want to believe. And of course, regular old voltmeters and other things like this. This is also one of the DC power supplies that John's got in his shop. And as you can see, it's a 0 to 30 volts, 0 to 15 amps. This thing can, it can imitate a battery. It's got a lot of push, okay, and a lot of the equipment is tested. A lot of the discharging systems, a lot of the solar chargers, and other things like this. These types of things are used to simulate solar inputs and things like this, where we can really put the equipment through its paces, make sure that the function switches are set properly at the right voltage trips and things like this. So this is higher. You can find them 0 to 30, 0 to 60 volts, but most of them are about 0 to 5 amps. Okay, the 15 amp one is that's a spectacular one. So anyway, all of these things, John uses these types of tools every single day. Okay, in the business of developing these chargers and the development, they're constantly testing and rejuvenating batteries, modifying these processes, finding hopefully shortcuts and things that are more reliable and everything. But what I've told you today is so far the most bulletproof method that gets the best results. Okay. So I'm coming to a close here. Just want to run through a few horror stories because they're fun. I bought a 2A12 and put it on a battery for 3 months, and the green light never came on. Now you got to love this kind of guy. Actually, this is not unreasonable. A battery that needs rejuvenation may not be able to top. The 2A12 the green light will come on at about 15 volts. And a battery in dire need of rejuvenation will probably not be able to be pushed to 15 volts, especially on the first time. And it doesn't matter whether you leave it on there for 3 months or 3 years or whatever else. As much electricity as you want to pay, I swear the utility will sell it to you. So this came in an email, and I must admit I didn't answer the email because my first response was this. But okay, so here's another one. I bought one of your chargers, then went to the dump and picked up 10 batteries. None of them would charge. Your equipment doesn't work. So anyway, so that's pretty much it. If you do have a question, what I'd really like you to do is come up here so we can get your questions on the film as well. So if you've got a question that's reasonable, that isn't anything like the ones I just showed you, then come on up and we'll answer a few more. Yeah.
It's a two-part question. I have published a couple of videos on some circuits that I built that are based on the Frontier Springs schematic diagram. How does your rejuvenator differ in terms of technology from the Frontier Springs design? And does the technology work on sealed lead acid as well as the wet cells?
I have no idea what that charger circuit that you mentioned is. I've never seen it, so I live a sheltered life. So I've never seen it, so I can't determine the differences. But what I will tell you is that I haven't talked about that there's any special circuitry. Okay, we learned about all this because we were doing inductive collapse, we were capacitor discharges, we were doing all these different things, but in the end, the only thing that made any difference at all was that we offered the battery an unrestricted charge, and that as the battery reached towards its topping charge, that we scaled the current back to limit unnecessary electrolysis. We kept the current at a rate so that the chemical reactions would happen so that no heat and no unnecessary electrolysis, gas production, would be produced, and continued to do that until the battery showed its topping event. Okay? That was what was important. And no specific circuit, there's no magic circuit. Thousands of circuits work.
So you're not using an inductive field collapse?
Nope. 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 We're not using that anymore. We did before. Okay? Our chargers work better now than they have ever worked before, and they aren't using any of those methods. Okay? We're still using proprietary circuitries developed by John that are absolutely spectacular. Okay? They absolutely work better than they've ever worked, and we're not using capacitor discharge or inductive collapse anymore. Okay? Step up. Oh, sealed lead acids. In general, we don't like to work on them. And there's a reason, because quite often they have also been subject to repeated undercharging. And a lot of like gel cells and other sealed batteries have been like put in uninterruptible power supplies, UPS, and things like this, and they're on a constant trickle charger. Okay? No, that dries out the electrolyte, and that is a boat anchor. You can't do anything with them anymore. You may be able to find some batteries that are sealed types that you can rejuvenate. Okay? But in general, it's much more difficult to find candidates that will, where when you run the tests, okay, that will give you enough information to make a practical determination as to whether or not this is a wise business decision. Okay. A wide variety of batteries can be rejuvenated. The question is there any money in it? Okay, and if you want to take some batteries on as a pet project to learn, try anything, and because you'll learn, you'll learn how to waste time. You'll learn, but I mean, we learned all those things. So I mean, it's that's how you learn. Okay. So.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I was hoping that you might comment or hypothesize about the possibility of rejuvenation of hybrid batteries, since they're so very expensive. So that's becoming more and more commonplace. And of course, after so many years, they have to take that whole system out and put it in. That would be nice to be able to do that, and that could be quite a business model.
Okay. He's talking about batteries in hybrid cars, hybrid electrics. And typically, almost everything out there is lithium-ion batteries, that particular chemistry. And as you may have seen in the news, the little problem that the Boeing 787 has been having with its lithium-ion fire starters. Here's the deal, okay? A battery is a water fuel cell, okay? Compounds in the water, like lithium. Lithium is an explosive metal, okay? Lithium, sodium, potassium. If you take these in the metal form and you put them in water, lithium will get very hot. Sodium will burst on fire and dance around on the surface of the water, producing sodium hydroxide and a lot of thermal energy and burning off the hydrogen. Okay, potassium, even really sparkly, really nasty, and cesium, absolutely explosive. Forget it. Okay, so lithium is in that group of very, very unstable, raw metals that really don't want to be right next to water. Okay, this is their problem. Okay, now. So the battery manufacturers know this, okay, and the problem is that they require, for the most part, a very, very specific charge rate, okay, and they charge a lithium-ion battery with a very, very small voltage gradient to limit the current as it goes into it. And so if they see any unreasonable voltage, differentials on the battery, they also, most of them have an internal fuse that will blow. This is typical of laptop batteries and cell phone batteries and other things like this. This is why if you try and take a lithium battery out of a laptop and stick it on a 1AU, it all of a sudden becomes very, very dead. What you did was you blew the fuse. It didn't hurt the battery, but the battery manufacturers are assuming a constant current charging method, and if you put a pulse type charge method on it, they're going to see current surges which they interpret as a dangerous overcharging condition. Okay? So that's why we say on our website, no lithium-ion batteries on these chargers. Okay? So stand up here. No. Come here.
You didn't talk about the nickel-cadmium charging protocol. Is that the same with the discharge and charge and discharge and charge?
The protocol for nickel-cadmium is a little bit different, primarily because its voltage doesn't change that much. So I haven't personally worked a lot with nickel-cadmium. But just realize that you're going to have to adapt the methodology to get a similar response from the battery. I have seen nickel-cadmium batteries rejuvenated with the 1AU. Where the battery was at 0 volts for 5 years, and they brought it in, and within a couple weeks, they had it in a drill, and it would twist your elbow right off at the shoulder. So I mean, it was full power. So, but yeah, you just have to cycle it, and be careful. There's one thing that happens with nickel cadmium. It's not a sulfation event because there's no sulfate in it. But what happens is you can see that when the battery is discharged, the water's going away so that the concentration of the potassium hydroxide is getting stronger. Okay, and what happens is that starts forming crystals. Okay, and those crystals can actually grow right through the separators and create shorts that they short out a cell, okay? And just they grow little dendrites right through because it's a crystal. It'll part wood and all kinds of stuff. It'll move right through stuff, okay? Crystal growths can be really astonishingly strong at the molecular and atomic level, and if you encounter this type of situation, the simple thing to do is to put together a little circuit that allows you to charge up like a 10 or a 15 microfarad capacitor up to about 160 volts and drop it on the battery and just burn those suckers out like a fuse, just okay? Then the short's gone, everything's good, charge it right back. Okay, but until you get rid of those, and if you just do the slow, steady thing, it's just a short. It's just a happy short. It'll dump your, so you have to get rid of them. Okay, and so, and again, so like I said, always be on the lookout for short, the indications of short circuits, where a specific, voltage interval is missing from your top. Okay, with a nickel cadmium battery, that's 1.2 volts per cell. Okay. Any other? Can you stand up? No, just come up here. Right? We want you on camera, man. Really good.
I will.
Really good guy.
Just a quick question. We talked about rechargeable batteries there. There's one older style of technology, the NIMH batteries.
It's not older. I mean, metal hydride,
Yeah, the metal hydrides. And they're used quite a bit in, I believe, in the Prius, if I'm not mistaken, on one of them.
Yeah.
They can undergo the same process.
Yeah. The nickel metal hydride can be dealt with similarly to the nickel cadmiums. They're very responsive to rejuvenation, and if that's the kind of battery you have in the hybrids, then you can. But here's the thing. Like I was showing you, the problems always show up in the inner cells. Okay, so with a 12-volt battery, you have 4 inner cells. Okay, these hybrid batteries, some of these hybrid batteries are 300 volts. Okay, that's a lot of inner cells. Okay, so what we found when we started working on rejuvenating forklift batteries, for instance, okay, 2-volt, 1600 amp hour batteries, okay, 18 of those in a row to make 36 volts, okay. You put the hot charger on and you find which ones are hot with the thermal test, and then you work on those at 2 volts. You just rejuvenate the cells that aren't functioning. Okay. Now, in a hybrid 300-volt battery, you're going to have to dig into that physically, find the cell. It's very, very difficult to rejuvenate inner cells when they're that far away from your terminal. You're pretty much back to the old, what they call equalization, which is boil the hell out of it and hope for the best. Okay, that we just don't subscribe to that as much of a science or art. So anytime you have a really long string of cells like that, that is not a good candidate for rejuvenation using these methods.
Could you just touch real briefly on winter and summer charging, low temperature charging, high temperature charging?
Sure. Yeah. The lead acid battery does have some temperature issues as well. A lead acid battery that's fully charged at 70 degrees or above will behave the way you expect it to. The minute it's down to 60 degrees, 50 degrees, 40 degrees, all of a sudden its capacity is dropping very rapidly. And our chargers don't heat the battery very much. We pride ourselves on the fact that we aren't running battery heaters. So our chargers, a standard charger in the winter is great because it'll heat the battery right up to normal temperatures, whether you want them or not. And our chargers basically don't do that. Batteries do lose capacity as the temperature goes down, and that is an issue. It's something to stay aware of. Is that?
So if you're charging during the winter
Yes, the battery will still charge. The battery will still find a topping voltage and so on, and it will still regain as much capacity as long as you are taking the battery to a top where it gives you that little topping signature which says the chemistry is finished. Okay, at that point, regardless of the temperature, the battery has as much power in it as it can have at that temperature. It's 6 o'clock. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you very much.